Hey everybody, welcome back. So we're continuing on controllers, the Ruby on Rails course for the Odin project, September 2022. The controller's job is really to act as an ultimate middleman. It knows which questions it wants to ask the model, but lets the model do all the heavy lifting for actually solving those questions. It knows which view it wants to render and send back to the browser, but it lets the view take care of putting all that HTML together. That's why it's called a controller. Smart enough to know what to do and then delegate all the hard work. All it does is collect the proper batch of instance variables for sending over to the view. When does the controller get used? After an HTTP request comes into your application and the router decides which controller and action to map it to, Rails packages up all parameters that were associated with that request and runs the specified method in the specified controller. Once that method is done, Rails will take any instance variables you've given it in that controller method and ship them over to the appropriate view file so that they can be inserted into your HTML template view and ultimately sent back to the browser. It's pretty straightforward. Typically, controllers are pretty lightweight and don't have a whole lot of code, but are able to do a lot of the work with that code. What if you want to show all your blog posts in your site's index page? Run index action on your post controller and it will grab all your posts and send them over to HTML ERB file, which figures out how you actually want them displayed in a giant list or in a slick looking panels, whatever. The controller's index action would actually look as simple as this. So you've got the method of, on the post controller class, you've got a method of index, and you grab all the posts and you send them as instance variables here. In this simple action, we have the controller asking the model for something, post.all. Hey, give me all the posts. Post.all means give me all the posts. Packaging them up in an instance variable, so you're at posts. That's your instance variable, so you can view them, and then we'll automatically render the view as app views posts index.html. And we'll talk more about that later. So our learning outcome. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to do the following. Explain what goes on in a RESTful controller action, override an implicit render or view file, distinguish situations in which to use redirect to or render, handle the restrict parameter and post data passed to your controller, display a flash message. Okay, naming matters. One way that Rails makes your life a bit easier is that it assumes things are named a certain way and then execute them behind the scenes based on those names. For instance, your controller and its action have to be named whether you call them in your routes RB file when you mapped a specific type of HTTP request to them. The other end of the process is what the controller does when it's done. Once Rails goes to the end of the controller action, it grabs the instance variables from the controller and sends them over the view file, which is named the same thing as the controller action. The view file is named the same thing as the controller action. So here you've got, this is your controller action, and then this is your controller view. So that's just automated in Ruby. Controller action. Where were we? Just named in the controller action. So yeah. Indexes goes to def there. This isn't arbitrary. This is intentional to make your life a lot easier when looking for files later. If you save your files in a different folder or hierarchy, you'll have to explicitly specify which ones you want rendered. Rendering and redirecting. Although Rails will implicitly render a view file that is named the same thing as your controller action, there are plenty of situations when you might want to override it. A main case for this is when you actually want to completely redirect a user to a new page instead of rendering the result of your controller action. Redirects typically occur after controller actions where you've submitted information like to create a new post. There's no reason to have a create.html.erb file that gets displayed once a post has been created. We usually just want to see the post we created, and so we'll redirect over to the show page for the post. Let me just explain that again. You don't need to render a create file because that's almost like having a like a new page, right? You don't want to redirect. You don't want to re-render the create page. It's not like you want to start a new post. Say you're making posts. Once you create a new post, you don't want to go back to a create post page generally. So Rails automatically renders you to go back to the show page, and so you'll see that in the controller action. It says redirect to the show page. The distinction here is that your application treats a redirect as a completely new HTTP request. So it would enter through the router again, look for the show page corresponding to that post, and render it normally. That also means that any instance variables you set in your original create controller are wiped out along the way. If that's the common way to deal with successfully creating an object, how about when it fails for some reason? Like the user enters a too short post title. In that case, you can just render the view for another controller action, often the same action that created the form that you submitted, so the new action. The trick here is the view page gets past the instance variables from your current controller action. So let's say you tried to create a post and stored it to post, but it failed to save. Then you rendered new actions view, and the view will receive the post, the instance variable post you were just working with in the create action. This is great because you don't have to wipe the form completely clean, which is really annoying as a user. You can just identify the fields that failed and have the user resubmit. It may sound a bit abstract now, but you'll see the difference quickly when building. Let's see it in the code. So here we have make sure. So here we have a controller's post controller RB, and it's in the class of post controllers. And then the comment says make, but don't save an empty post, so the form we render knows which fields to use and where to submit the form. This action will render app views posts once it's done. So I'm going to walk along with this. Let's just open up the terminal real quick, and then we change directories into the desktop. And then I think, what's it under? Odin projects directories. If I list that out, cd my first Rails app. That's what we're working with here. And then I'm just going to go code dot to open this up. And once Visual Studio Code opens up, I won't need terminal anymore because I can use the terminal in here. And so, do we have a posts controller in here? Let's close all the windows. We don't. But I think we have cars. Yeah. They're essentially going to work the same. So, and then what I want to do now is I'm going to say Rails C to open up the... Okay, so I've changed my Ruby version since last time. So I'm going to go RVM use 3.1.0. Cool. And now if I go Ruby-V, it says that I'm using 3.1.0, so I should be able to go Rails C now. Cool. And so now I'm in the Rails console. So what's this saying? You can say post dot, well, like we could say car dot count. So right now we have 2 cars, right? But now if I said car dot new, that doesn't actually do anything. It just instantiates this in memory, and because it's not saved to a variable, it's basically just lost. If we do car dot count, we'd still have 2. So that's what this is saying. An empty post, the action will render apps posts once it's done. So this just provides an empty post to the new rendered file, and so that, and then that one can be saved. So once that one, the redirect from this new post takes you to the create page. We know this will create a run. Okay, so if I were to say at car is equal to car.new, we have at car saved in here, or at car saved in here as something. But if we do car.count, we still have just 2 cars. We haven't saved anything yet. So you can have an instance variable that's not saved to the database. That's basically what this is saying. So we know we will get run once we receive the submitted form for our new action. So this empty car or post is being sent to the view form, and then the user will be able to fill it out by that. Remember your REST actions. We'll just, okay, so we know this will get run once we've received the submitted form. So once this gets submitted to the form, we'll just use pseudocode to recognize it here. Well, we don't really need to use pseudocode because if we do, if we get a new one and then it redirects, they fill out the information in here using the form on the view, and then they'll be down here. Then this new command will pass the data to the create here, and so then the car params will be passed back through the car form, right? So here that we've got their model for car, and then we've got make, model, which are all here, make, model, and year. And these are going to be passed in to the controller via the params. So in the form, they'll fill out here. So at car, I think it's like make equals Audi. And so now if we did car, we'd see that it's filled out that. And so you use the form to fill this stuff out. The form is just a fancy way of being able to do this. Model A4 and as you can see, this isn't the best way to fill out information for users. They like to use forms rather than this. And so this form creates it here, and it makes it so that you can send in the make, model, and the year. And then when the user presses submit, it takes this at car symbol and passes it back as the car params. And let me show you that too. So let's run the app, right? Rails S, that gives us localhost 3000. Oh, needs to be cars. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to do, so now we're displaying this form, right? If we were to go, yeah, like P. If I were to save this and refresh it, we'd see that the form has that in there. And so we can get rid of that for now. I'm just showing you that we're in this form. And so it's got the make, model, and year. So make, model, year. So if we fill this out, Audi. No, let's do something different just because I don't want it to get confusing. Model 535. And then the year, 2022. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, so we know that we're in this controller right now, right? And so what happens if we go back to the controller, we want to go to the create page. And so I'm going to put in here a buy bug. And I think that this is, I'm going to check the gem file just to make sure we have buy bug in here. Oh, we don't. Okay. But I have added pry to here in previous lessons. So if you haven't added that, then you can add pry to development and test. And so with pry, we'll be able to go into the controllers and we can say binding.pry. And what's this going to do? This is going to stop us within this controller. So I'm going to allow it to set up this instance variable, and then we'll be able to see how it goes. So if I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to submit this information. Okay, cool. And so now you can see that the console is stopped here. The app says it's still loading. It's got that loading bar on it because we stopped it in here. And now that we're in this debugging console, we can check here. So we've stopped right at this point, and so we could inspect the car's params. So you see BMW model 535i, model 2002, permitted true. This has all come from the controller, and it's the permitted true part comes from down here where we have our params. We require that the type is car, and then we permit the make, model, and year. And so when we come back up here, we can see above we did car.new is equal, and then what we're doing is we're passing in the car params. So the car parameters, like car params, what is that? I think, yeah, it's an action controller parameters. This protects our data from having random data passed in here. If we just do car.new, we get something like that. But if we do car.new with the car params, you can see that we have a car that's being filled out, or we have a car that has the data that we passed in. And then we have this respond to block, which is we can explain later. But if we were to do car.all or car.count, come on, car.count. You see, we still have 2 there, even though we have an instance variable that's there. It's not saved yet. And so what we want to do is run car.save. So once we step through into there, then we will actually save the car. So I'm going to just exit this from now. Well, yeah. So what's going to happen is this instance variable of car is going to be saved at this point. If it's successful, and car.save returns a Boolean, and it actually writes it to the to the database. So I'm going to exit here, and then you'll see even after this, it's going to, here's where we said exit. I didn't want to save it there. So it says insert. This is the database call right here, where it's inserted make BMW 535 into this. And you see when it saved it, it automatically did a created at and updated at element. And so that completed, and then it rendered the show and the underscore for show and the applications, the application with the show underscore card and all this stuff. And so now if we come back to here, we'll see that it's been listed at, and we're on the show path. And if we were coming back to cars, you can see the 535 is now listed on all the cars. And so now if we were to come back to here and start a new console, Rails C, now if we were to do car.count, so the count all the cars, there's a third one in there, and car.last is the last car that was created, and so now we've saved that to the database. So that's a pretty important thing for how the controller operates with that. And so yeah, I hope that helps. I really went in deep to here because this was very confusing to me initially, so I hope that helps. So yeah, we'll continue on with the post. So the thing to pay attention to is that if we successfully are able to save our new post in the database, we redirect to the post's show page. Note that a shortcut you'll see plenty of times is instead of writing redirect to post's path, post.id, so redirect to post path, post.id, we just write redirect to @post, car URL, redirect to @car. Interesting, yeah. So this is the way that they're doing it now. So what they're saying is you can just say @car. So let's see if that works. If we go back here, we go to cars.new, make Tesla Model 3, year 2022. Okay, and if I go back to the server, you'll see that we're hung up on binding.pry again, so I want to get rid of this. So I save that and then just press exit to get out of binding.pry. And it says that it was sent directly and it just went to the show page. So this was instead of having car URL @car, you can just shorten that. So why the scaffolding is doing that in Rails 7, I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter. Okay, cool. So, and then you'll see everything worked out just the same. So we've got another Model 3 Tesla there. Redirect to post, just write redirect to post, redirect to car. So we can do that because Rails knows people did that so often that they gave you the option of writing it shorthand. We'll use this in an example as we develop in the future. The error condition in the create action above is going to render the same form that we rendered in the new action, though this time @post will be the post object that we tried and failed to save. So they're saying if something happens in there. So yeah, there's things that can happen where a car.save doesn't work. Let's go back to the console. Let's see here. I'm going to actually open up the schema. Do we have an example? Oh, this only has cards. So there's an example is like if you had like the make was required dot. Okay, well this is a bad example because you never edit the schema file. But if you were to make a required thing, oh yeah, well, here's what we could do. Car, the model. I think you can make it. Okay, I'm not going to worry about that for now. But basically, you can have times where it fails to save, and then it will render the new, and it'll give an unprocessable entity, and it'll pass data into that to show you, to give you the opportunities to fix your data. And this will show you the render, and it will actually render the car.errors. It'll show you what was wrong. Cool. So there will be post object that we tried to and failed to save, so we'll also have some errors attached to it, which can be used to highlight in red the fields of the culprit. So I will show this down the line. It's pretty interesting. Yeah. Okay, so multiple render and redirects. It's important to note that render and redirect to do not immediately stop your controller action like return statement would. So you have to be really careful that your logic doesn't result in running more than one of those statements. If you do, you'll get hit with an error. You're usually pretty straightforward to debug. If you write something like this, so let's follow along with it. Show user.findparams.id if user.isMale render show boy, else and render show girl. Okay, so how would be an example for us? Now, before action, we have set car here. And so set car, so it's going to set its car. So you come down here and you see this is the set car method. So it does car.find params ID. Okay, cool. So if we were to run a binding.pry here, and then we were going to go to a cars and we wanted to see, let's see, this is one car/1. And now if we go back to the server, we'll see that we've got our binding.pry down here. So what's happened here? Before action, we've done set car. And so before the show action was executed, we scroll down here and we see that set car was ran. And so set car gave us this variable car. And because we picked the first one in our URL for BMW 350, I don't even know if there is a 350. This is the parameters that have been set. So yeah. And then this one just automatically, the show automatically renders, it automatically does render format.h, I think so. Oh, I got to get rid of that too. So it automatically does render at car, I think. So we'll just exit out of here for now, and then we're going to get rid of the binding.pry, and it'll do that. And so if we refresh, renders the car. Oh, well, look at that, the difference between there. The implicit. Did this car destroy the car? Look at that. Render car. Format.html, redirect to car. There's some sort of a difference in there. Render format, undefined variable method, HTML. Format.html. Too few arguments. So let's try to say format.html. Here's the car you wanted to see. Interesting, that doesn't work. So I'm really interested in what actually does it return? Car. Render car. So that just renders. Oh, so render car is just going to show the partial, whereas show gives you, and it just implicitly gives you this. Interesting. I'm going to have to look into that. I'm not really sure. If anybody knows what that's all about in the section, let me know. But like, you could say like if the car, what this is getting at is if car dot make is equal to BMW, and is it capitalized? It's capitalized. Then render at car, else, or not else, but end, and then you say car. Render car. So you render the partial of car. This is going to give us an error. Double render error. Render or redirect were called multiple times. Please note that that you may only call it render or redirect. So yeah, it'll do the same. Redirect to, yeah, redirect to car. So yeah, same. Okay, so it's this is the error that they're talking about here. So you can only do this twice. You can say else redirect to car, and then that's going to fix the problem because there's only one way to redirect there. So yeah, there's the render car and redirect to car. Does that change it? Oh, that's just causes an error. So yeah, this Oh yeah, this is just refreshing it over and over again. That's an infinite loop. So we don't want to do that. Okay, so yeah, that's the error that you get if you have two renders in there. So yeah, you have params and strong params. Okay, in this example, we saw ... code here to set up a new @ post based on the form info. Which is right here. Code here to set up a new post based on the param info. Okay, so how do we grab that info? We keep saying that the router packages up the parameters that were sent with the original HTTP request, but how do we access them? With the params hash, it acts just like a normal Ruby hash and contains the parameters of the request. Cool, so we showed that earlier when we had the binding.pry in the create path, right? With the params hash, it acts just like a normal Ruby hash that contains parameters of the request hash, stored as a key value pairs. So how do we get the ID of the post we're asking for? Params ID. You can access any parameters this way which have scalar values, strings, numbers, booleans, nil, anything that's flat. Some forms will submit every field as a top-level scalar entry in the params hash, e.g. params post title. Might be the my test post title, and params post body. Might be a body of posts, etc. And these can access with no issues. You have control over this, as you'll learn in the lesson on forms. Strong parameters. Oftentimes, though, you want to send parameters from the browser that are all packaged nicely into a hash or nested into an array. It can make your life a lot easier because you can just pass that hash straight into post.new, your hash of attributes here, because that's what post.new expects anyways. We won't really go too deep into this stuff until the lessons on models and forms, but you should be aware that the structure of the data you're being sent from the form depends entirely on how you choose to set up that form. It's really based on how you choose your name and your fields using the HTML name attribute. Okay, so that makes sense to me, but if as a new programmer, I think that would be really confusing. In our example, we will assume that our params post is giving us a hash of post attributes like title, body, author, which is exactly what post.new is expecting. Whether you get your parameters packaged up in a hash or all on the top level as individual attributes like params ID, again, it is up to you and how you create your form. But no, it's usually easier for you to handle receiving a nicely packaged hash of post attributes in your controller. The important distinction between the scalar parameter values like strings and more complex parameters like hashes and arrays is that Rails 4 implemented some protections in the controller called strong parameters. This is so the user can't send you harmful data like account settings themselves or an admin user when they create an account. To do this, Rails makes you explicitly verify that you are willing to accept certain items of a hash or array. This used to be done in Rails 3 by setting ATTR accessible in the model to allow attributes, so you will probably see that in a lot of Stack Overflow posts and earlier applications. To explicitly allow parameters, you use the methods require and permit. Cool. So if you come down here, you'll see that we have require and permit. Basically, you'll require the name of your array or hash to be in params. Otherwise, it'll throw an error. And then you permit the individual attributes inside the hash to be used. For example, so here we have title, body, author. Here we have make, model, year. These are car params. And I don't know why they set it to allowed post params, because they're almost always set to just the name of the model. This will return a hash for you of the params that you explicitly allow. So yeah, I think if you guys remember, we did that in where we created a new car and we made it new, and then we put the binding.pry in there. We had car params, and those were protected params. So like, what would be an easy way to describe this? Well, if you went into Postman, you know, if you're a sophisticated hacker or even mildly sophisticated, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure this out. You know, you're making a post request to /cars. So, yeah, you could do this in Postman. And then instead of just saying make, model, year, say you're doing it for a username, you know, email, password, and then you could put in In Postman, you could just write in a value of role admin, and it would pass into this car params, and then you'd have somebody who just logged in, tricking your system into making them think that you're an admin for the site. So that's why they do. You could have users in here that would have a role, but if you don't add it to the permit thing, then you won't allow people to do that just simply through accessing the form. Hope that makes sense. It can be inconvenient, but in Rails, protecting you from bad users. You'll usually package these strong parameter helpers up in your own private method at the bottom of your controller, then call that method where you need to get those specific params. So our create action above can now be filled out a little bit more. So yeah, they're just doing this because we were using this default scaffold one. It's just showing you that. So yeah, here, redirect to post path. That's funny. They didn't even do it. Even they said you can redirect by just adding @post, and you don't need to do it, but you don't even need to do it here. But this one, to redirect to ID, set up congratulation method. Well, the congratulations method's not there. Yeah, if you create, you do that, but then you want your notice to have that. They should have a notice in here. Anyways, cool. Oh, that's what's happening. They're going to talk about it down here. Cool. So Flash, the last piece of the code we need to write there is how to set our special message for the user. Rails gives you a neat tool for sending success and error messages, like the little green message that briefly appears at the top of the application to congratulate you for signing up, called the Flash. It acts just like a hash. You can set its keys to specify. So let's try this again. Let's go to make, model, and year. Let's go Subaru Outback 2022. Create new car. You see this green message right here? Where did this come from, right? If we go to our show, HTML, we don't, oh, the notice is here. So yeah, notice becomes a variable which is passed in here. We could check it out too by going binding.pry. Let's go create a new car. And you can put bindings in your views as well, which is pretty cool. So now we could do Honda element 2022, create the car. And now you'll see in our console, again, we've stopped in here. And if we do notice, we can explore this. And the notice is just a string right now, right? Dot class, it's a string. Parent, that doesn't help. No, okay. So yeah, I thought that would be passed in as a parameter. Anyways, so yeah, that just kind of shows you that. I'm going to get rid of this pry, and then we can exit out of here. Cool. But anyways, that's what's set up here, and it's being noticed. And this is the ERB function for passing in that string. So Rails has automatically set for your notice to be set in there, and so it just passed in this string. Cool. Flash, the last piece of code we need to write there is how to set our special messages for the user. Rails gives you a neat tool for sending success and error messages, like little green messages that appear. It's just like that. You can set its keys to a specific message, and then that will be available for you to access if you want to display it in your views. You can use any keys you want for the Flash, but it's conventional to just stick to 3: success, error, and notice. So, success, error, and notice. So this success message above might look like Flash, success, great, your post has been created. Interesting. So it's not doing that in Rails 7. The reason you can, I think this is Rails 7. We'll start a new thing. What is it, Rails? Oh no. Rails-E. Okay, so Rails 7. Yeah, we're on 7.0.3. And so you might not be running into this error. I think there's a way for me to automate that, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. So, yeah, I think that they would say like Flash notice I'm not going to worry about that right now. But they're basically saying that they're talking about it differently than the way it showed up on our scaffold. The reason you can use any key is because you will have to write a snippet of code in your view anyways to display the flash. But sticking to the convention one is good practice. The other sneaky trick with Flash is that it automatically erases itself once you've used it, so you don't have to worry about it displaying every time you visit a new page. One-time use, like Snapchat. One last distinction. Now, this is a great way. This is a rabbit hole that they should not have in here. I would recommend. I'm going to take a picture of this and recommend that they take this out. Because if you're trying to focus and they send you a link to Snapchat, that is not helpful. One last distinction, though, goes back to the difference between a redirect and a render. Remember, a redirect submits a completely new HTTP request, effectively leaving our application in the dust and starting over from the top. We lose all our data, except for the Flash. The Flash is specifically designed to travel with HTTP requests, so you have access to it when you get redirected to the next page. Render doesn't go that far. It just uses a view file that's part of your application's normal flow, and you have access to all your instance variables in that file. Because the Flash is special, you actually have to use flash.now instead of Flash when you are just rendering a view instead of submitting a whole new request. That would look flash.now error. Rats, fix this your mistake, please. The distinction between Flash and flash.now lets Rails know that it will need to make the Flash available to you. If you use Flash when you should have used flash.now, you'll start seeing your message showing up on a page too late, and it should be obvious what went wrong. For the full controller, code can be written out in this create action. So we're looking at another create action. I'm just going to scroll over. We have post controllers, create. It creates from the allowed post. So once this is instantiated, it looks down here and it creates them. And so it's going to allow, first off, it's going to require that it's in a post form. And then it's going to permit only the title, body, author, rather than permitting anything that somebody wanted to pass in. And then they save it, and then they create a new, and then they add to the Flash object as success here, and then they redirect to the post. Else, they redirect flash.now. Oh, cool. This is actually stuff I didn't really realize. Nice. Okay, so the action did a fair bit of stuff. Grab the form data, make a new post, try to save the post, set up a successful message, and redirect you to the post if it works, and handle the case where it doesn't work by berating you for your foolishness and re-rendering the form. A lot of work for only 10 lines of Ruby. Now that's smart controlling. So yeah, a lot of things happen here. We can create, show, and handle errors, and provide messaging to the front end from those errors. A lot of stuff happens with a little bit of code. So our assignment, that's really just a taste of the Rails controllers, but you should have a pretty good working idea of what's going on and what tricks you can use. Read the Rails guides chapter on controllers, sections 1 to 4.5.3 and 5.2. We'll cover session 5.1 more in the future, so don't worry about that for now. Wow. Okay. Additional resources. This section contains helpful links to other content. It isn't required, so consider it supplemental. Controllers and routes video. I'm going to watch this. Rails rendering and partials. I might as well watch this as well. And so we'll do the knowledge check now. I'm not going to read through the whole Rails 1 to 4.5. That's 1 to 4.5. Yeah, 4.5 and then 5.2. 4.5, 5.2. 5.2, the Flash. Okay, so a lot of this is just covering what we've already just discussed. So I'm going to skip this for now, but I do recommend going through this and actually writing it out. Let me know in the comments if you would like me to actually go through this. I can make a controllers supplemental video about going over that and going over this stuff. But for now, we'll just skip that. So for our knowledge check, what does a controller do? A controller receives the HTTP request and then makes orders to the model. The model returns the results of the order, and then it passes it to the user via the views. Why is it important to adhere in Rails naming convention for your controllers and its method? It's important because method names within your controller correspond to the views here, or the views in here. So because we're in the cars controller, then Rails knows to go to cars, and then if we're doing the index, it knows to go to the page of index. If you recall the index or home, if you were to change this method name, then it wouldn't find the proper view. What's the difference between render and redirect to? Render maintains the data that the application is carrying on, whereas redirect to, it makes a new HTTP request, which actually goes through the router. Which variable in your controller contains all the data sent in by the user? The params. Pretty sure. Yeah, the parameters. Data from the client can never be trusted. Which helper methods should you incorporate in your controller to prevent that? That is the car params, where you have require and permit. Let's require and permit. Strong parameters. Yeah, so that's basically what it's trying to say. That's your require and permit right here. When is a flash message shown? It's shown when you render a new page. So if you look up here, you'll see, well, actually it doesn't have a flash here. So this example is not great, but the one that they used here, you can redirect to a post, and that'll have your flash, whereas flash.now is for the rendering. How do we change when a flash is shown? We change the content of it, right? So up here, flash.now or flash.success, you should just change it so that it exists. And then if it exists, it will display in the thing. Whereas if there's nothing there, if we just go to the show without, see right now there's something in the show. So if we're going to inspect here, because there's something within here, it shows. But let's just refresh the show page. You'll see that the HTML is still here, but there's nothing in it, so it doesn't display. And that's because this notice variable was empty because it hadn't come from the format.html in here. So that's why that happened. All right, back to here. How do we change when a flash is shown? Well, if we don't create it, it's not shown. All right, well, mark that one as complete. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next lesson.